the desire, and the need and want from our people. Like they wanted to be more involved. They wanted more transparency. They wanted to have a hand in what we were doing. And so now it's more like, let's share the burden. Let's talk more openly about the goals. Let's bring more people in to form the goals.
It really is about just taking action,
Mhm.
because if we sit and try to make it perfect, all of our ideas about what that needs to look like will get in the face of what actual reality is.
Don't ever try to do everything yourself. First of all, when I came into leadership, I talk about having that list.
Hello, friends. I'm Adam Loveridge, and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Podcast, From Growth to Acquisition. I'm the owner and founder of Blue Forge Marketing. We are a home services marketing agency specializing in heating and air conditioning, plumbing, remodeling, and garage door contractors. For more information about Blue Forge Marketing, visit us online at blueforgemarketing.com. Hello and welcome to the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition Podcast. My name is Adam Loveridge with Job Calls, and today I am joined by Claire Ferrara with Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. They are in the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. Claire, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's absolutely my pleasure. Now, we're going to be talking about leadership today, but I think from a different perspective, actually, and getting into this idea that even though we might be leaders and leading companies, that we are definitely not perfect. But before we dive into that, Claire, what I'd really love to do is just take me back and give me an idea about who Standard Heating and Air Conditioning is, how long you guys have been around, and you've got quite the story there. So tell me about your company.
Yeah, so my grandfather started our business in 1930, and he just wanted a place that everyone could come and receive service. And he started actually like door to door, one customer at a time. Eventually, my dad took over at the age of 19, and my uncle joined him. And then about, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I kicked my dad out, bought him out, and started working with my uncle. And today I am our company president and majority owner.
Fantastic. And tell me a little bit about your guys' size. I mean, how many trucks do you have on the road, employees, that sort of
Yeah,
thing?
so we have about 130 employees. We've got, oh gosh, about 90 some, trucks out on the road any given day. And we are residential retrofit work. So no new construction, no light commercial, and we'll do about 40 million in revenue this year.
Coming back to kind of our idea about leadership here, I suspect that the leadership at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning has probably changed from the days that Grandpa started to your dad. Hadn't mentioned this earlier to me, but I find it kind of fascinating that your dad took over at 19. I think you took over at 19 too, didn't you? Or that's when you started to find your way into the leadership of this?
Yeah, so I'm 39 now. I didn't take over when I was 19, but when I was 19, I was actually working here and decided that I wanted to come back here someday. So I was 19 years old when I kind of sat my dad and uncle down and said, I'm going to buy your business from you someday. And they're like, yeah, right, kid. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And so I got some outside assistance to help us, and we made a plan at that point.
That's awesome. And I'm curious, what did that look like when you sat down and kind of put a plan together? Did you hire a coach, or what did that entail?
Yeah, I am a big fan of coaches getting third party perspectives, right? Because we often don't know what we can't see. And so in this case, we actually brought a family business consultant in, and he was like part business advisor, part therapist, frankly. And he helped us consider the questions to ask, topics to kind of put out on the table, put us through some exercises, and ultimately we laid out on the table like, hey, here's who I need you to be, dad or uncle, in order for me to show up a certain way. And then they got to do the same kinds of things. And we actually also came to some agreements. We had a couple pages of documents on like what I was going to do to come to the business, what they would do, so that we could all be on the same page.
That's absolutely fantastic. And before we start moving into the topic of conversation, I'd like to get into the marketing aspect of this a little bit, because this podcast is about marketing. It's about growth, that sort of thing. And I think that many of the listeners who would be tuning into this would love to know, how you guys get your message out in the marketplace, and And I suspect that that's probably changed substantially since, your grandpa and dad were in the business to now. But, tell me a little bit about how you guys are getting the message out
You know,
there.
a lot of the methods have changed, but I will tell you, word of mouth is still king. We get over half our business is referral business. And so everything we do, we're still kind of hammering home like we want the customer to go tell someone, right? We want
Sure,
the reviews, we want all those kinds of things. But yes, the methods have changed a little bit. We're no longer really like in the yellow pages. For
sure.
example, we actually find that today there's a lot of streaming, right? We're building a social media presence, YouTube. We have people who come and look at YouTube to see, they want answers to technical questions or how to's, and they're finding their way to us ultimately actually calling us, right? When they're not sure how to do it themselves. There's a difference between branding, right? And making the phone ring, and
Sure.
we make sure that we are still doing both in today's world. Like the branding can never stop. Making the phone ring, we've had to experiment with. Even time of day something is seen by someone digitally, or if there's a text campaign, those things matter. And we're really digging into the demographics more now, around
Hmm.
age and socioeconomic status, right? Like education, household income. Those things have become more important as we tailor messages in different delivery methods to people. So the analytics now way more important than they were even 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen something similar to that too. And you talk about, demographics too. I'm wondering, I know that when I spoke with, Abby from your office that handles the marketing there, that you guys are doing CTV, OTT, that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we've seen work really, really well is not only looking at the demographic information of those, of those people that we want to, shove ads out in front of, right? But also the age of the home. And I think that in HVAC in particular, you can kind of, you figure a standard unit's going to last about 15 years. And so you go back 15 years from, from brand new, and there's a window there of people that could be changing out systems. You go 15 years further back from that. And it's fascinating to me how big data works in this. And I'm curious what, what you've seen there in terms of just the major changes over the last several years.
Yeah, I would say permit data also can be really useful in that way, right? Because you can see like when permits were pulled and where. So just kind of
Hmm.
similar vein, for
Yeah,
individuals. Yeah, I would say big data like rules all now, right? I mean, we expect our vendors to come to us with more than just like, oh, here's an impression, right? Or it feels like this. It's like, no, we want facts, not feelings. I would say if you don't know your data, like that's where you're missing. If you don't know where to start asking for facts. Look for the facts. Because if you're
hmm,
operating on feeling, that's where you're going to get into trouble. And that's where I've had people ask us questions, whether they're just starting or they're revamping something. Not that we're experts, but I would say like that's where we have found the difference, made the dollars go further or seen better return, is where we started to expect our vendors to provide more data and we started tying that data like end to end, not just did
sure.
the phone ring, but what happened with those leads? Did we actually close them in whichever department they land in? So take that data, make sure you're certain of it, and then tie it through your whole organization.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point about attribution reporting, right? Really is what it boils down
Yeah.
to. And it is really cool to watch how somebody goes from seeing you on this platform to hitting a Google ad to, moving through the website, right? And maybe hitting going out to Facebook or something and then coming back. And
Yeah.
it's just, I think to your point anymore, it really is about brand. It's about how do we consistently get our brand out there over and over and over again.
Mhm.
And yeah, big data plays a part. I mean, you look at Google and Apple and everybody out there. Big data is really the big thing, right? They're all collecting data, and it's all there and available. But one of the things that I really liked what you had to say though too, and I've seen this quite a bit from our end in terms of clients that we work with, and just good effective HVAC marketing. At the end of the day, is that content marketing piece of it. And you mentioned that you're doing a lot of streaming now and a lot of video content around, DIY type of stuff. And I'm just curious how you've seen, really that type of content perform, just as a kind of overall.
Yeah, so in the DIY, I will say there's like a fine balance there because We want people to call us, right? Not necessarily do it themselves. But what we have found with that type of content is they trust us more. They feel like they can rely on us more because we are willing to share something. And what we're sharing sounds logical, right? It's working. We're
Sure.
reliable. So, anything that we turn into video content for streaming or YouTube or other social platforms, it's really designed to let them get to know us. And so, it wasn't so much like, hey, here's this brand we want to put out. It was like, what do they want to know about us that's going to tie them to us? And so we had to kind of put some research into that stuff. And that's where some of the demographics came in and buying preferences. And there's a whole group of people now that they might Google us, right? And say, here's the reviews. But then they go to your social pages and they want to understand, like, who are the people that work there and what is the feeling and what's kind of the culture and the attitude. And that is very different today than it was even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the level of transparency that people have into your business, I think nowadays, is
Yeah.
just insane. And well, and it's expected.
Hmm.
And what I find really fascinating about that is, I mean, I'm a few years older than you, but not more than a decade. Anyway, in fact, I'm turning 48 here next week. So woohoo.
Right.
But
Congratulations.
thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Another run around
You
the
know,
sun.
but yeah, but when I grew up, there was this expectation of privacy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's
And
gone.
yeah, you talk to my kids and they're like, "What's privacy?" Right? Which all of our stuff is online. We know it's online. We don't care, it's really fascinating, just that cultural shift, I think, too.
Yeah. And I would say that actually is a trend that's internal to the business and external. So as much as like your customers really want to get to know who you are or put a face to a name or see how do you treat people? Are they happy in their job, right? What's the feeling there? Um, Transparency with your employees is also important. And that's been a pretty critical component of leadership that I have learned. And so that's a concept that might transcend marketing, but you should
Yeah.
face that internal too.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think maybe just the last couple points that I'll hit on marketing, and we can move on from this, because it isn't about just spending all of our time talking about all the different tactics that you
Yeah.
guys are using to market yourself. So you talked about vendors, right? When on the marketing side of things, and really expecting higher, data and analytics and that sort of thing coming from those relationships.
Mhm.
What I know about companies is they start to grow that more and more of that marketing aspect tends to come in house.
Sure.
And so my question to you, and maybe that's not the case with your company, but what percentage of your marketing would you say that you have pulled in house at this point, and how much of that is still with outside vendors?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say probably a good half of it, solidly is with vendors, maybe a little bit more. Uh, we really do find good support in having outside vendors. I know there's a trend on coming internal. Um, we actually have 2 people internal who work on a lot of this stuff. You met Abby, and we have another employee named Skylar, and she does fantastic work around the YouTube content, the social media, and provides some other support. But I think it's really key if you find a good vendor, like, why would you not bring them with you, right? Because if
Yeah,
if the value is there and we're getting the return, I don't really care how big I am, like, that's working for us. I don't necessarily wanna change that.
sure,
So that's how we've looked at that, but what we do want control of, right, like, we want to make sure that we're reviewing the content. We come up with some of the content. We don't
sure.
necessarily rely on our vendors for that, but we wanna know where it should be and who's looking at it and, help tie it all together, and we use vendors for that kinda stuff.
That makes a lot of sense to me, and then, well, and to add another point to that, I would say is that one of the reasons I started this podcast is because we had several of our larger clients, that were in that 100 truck range anyway that got
Mhm.
acquired, which meant that we as the vendor did not get brought along, right?
Yeah.
And it just and so so I've got a it's funny because we'll reach out to people about this coming on the show, and every now and again get people they're like, "Oh yeah, you're in bed with private equity. There's they're destroying the planet," kind of thing. And I'm like, "Well, first of all, no, we're not, and second of all, that's up to debate." But from my perspective, anyway, it really boils down to, I guess I really just completely agree with you. And some of our best relationships are with clients that we've had for many years, and we get to grow with them. And I think that there's some real value in that,
Mhm.
in terms of being able to have those strategic allies, if you will, that know your business, that have been there, that have helped you achieve that growth. And I completely agree. Why wouldn't you want to, to keep them on as strategic assets there, just like employees, right?
Mhm.
So that's my two bits on that particular topic of conversation, anyway. And then the other question that I had about your marketing, just specifically, is really more of a numbers thing. But on average, what would you say your percentage of revenue is that goes into marketing and advertising?
We are between 6 and 8%.
6 and 8. Okay,
Depending on the year. That's
fantastic.
where we've been the last, yeah, like 10 years.
Okay. Okay,
Mhm.
fair enough. Well, is there anything else that you want to talk about from a marketing perspective before we move on?
I would just say, like, don't be discouraged, right? Tactics change, like, the world changes. You have to stay up on that, but just know that that's happening to everyone. And I know I've been in a position where sometimes I have been discouraged, like, oh man, we thought that campaign was gonna rock it, or we're not getting the return here. The good news is, like, you have more control than you think you do. Just make sure that you're holding your vendors and your partners accountable, right? Like, call them up. Hey, we got to try something different. And if they're not willing to do that or they can't provide you data and information, then you got to find a different partner. But don't be discouraged. This is a game where you got to kind of keep reinventing yourself, but don't do it just to reinvent yourself. Look at your data.
Yeah, I think so too. And to your point earlier, the idea that you still do a good amount of your business, maybe as much as half through word of mouth, that's not going to change. That's not going anywhere. And I think if you're controlling and really optimizing the customer experience, plus maybe asking for referrals, is, that certainly helps too, right? Just like asking for reviews. Even companies doing $40 million a year are still going to have a huge word of mouth component to their business. I think it's fantastic that you recognize that, and that is still part of the core of who Standard Heating and Air Conditioning is.
Thank you. I would say we have had times where we've been better than other times at actually asking for the referral. Like, when we don't do that, we have seen it drop, right? In today's world, a lot of people know they expect to go leave a review. But we've also seen a lot of consumers do ask. Like, think about Nextdoor and Reddit and all these other places online. Like, people are asking, who did you use? So referrals still really exist. It just may not be that someone's like standing next to their next door neighbor anymore in the backyard and like talking about it that way. And so do not sleep on referrals. Like, that really should be what it's about.
Well, I agree, and I think even Google Business Profile and Yelp, for that matter, right, are a form of referral marketing, because if nothing else, you're leveraging the social proof from existing customers to bring in new customers. And so it is a tenet of marketing that I don't see ever going away, period. And I think it's fantastic to hear that that's something that is still a big focus of your company. So moving on here, let's talk about leadership. I guess my first question about leadership is, how have you seen the leadership change from grandpa to father now to Claire?
Yeah, I would say pretty significantly it has changed. Every generation in our business has served its purpose, right? But it's definitely been an example of what got you here is not going to get you there. My grandpa was just a wonderful people person, very charismatic in that way, met people, networked, right? And that's really kind of how he built his business, like on a handshake and like, a philosophy and like, let's go. But when my dad took over, like the place was almost bankrupt, right? And like people were stealing, and because he just like trusted everyone in that way.
Mm,
Um, and so my dad's leadership was very like process, accountability. And that really then brought a group of people together who could thrive, right, on process and knowing exactly what they needed to do. And everybody knew their role, right? Uh, it was very top down leadership. The business was smaller, also generationally. That was kind of a thing at that time.
sure.
And, in transitioning to me, what I recognized is like, okay, it was time to bring the people more into the mix. Part of that was, hey, I haven't been doing this since I was 19, even though I grew around it, I spent time away. And so I need other people to help me. And part of it was I just recognized that there was a change in the desire and the need and want from our people. Like they wanted to be more involved. They wanted more transparency. They wanted to have a hand in what we were doing. And so now it's more like, let's share the burden. Let's talk more openly about the goals. Let's bring more people in to form the goals. But guess what? Like we're all going to have to answer to that. So I've been trying to find a balance between the process and accountability and the people. And we're still working on that.
Yeah, I love that, and you talked about goals here for a second, and I'm curious, is there a specific process that you use at the company level to do your to define your goals and to really incorporate in those key players in your operation in that goal setting process?
Yeah, so like all things, this is also evolving, but I'll tell you what we have done. So I have included our operational leaders in planning every year. So we sit down and talk about, it's like doing a SWOT on your business kind of, and
Mhm.
talk about things we like, things that aren't going well, threats to our business, like what's imminent and we need to work on. And we kind of throw that all together and do some analysis. Um, and we decide as a group what is going to be most important after we make sure we're making money, right? Because that's like number one. What's going to be most important to work on? And everybody gets a say in that from that group. And we expect that every operational manager is representing their team, right? And their team's wants and needs and what they see for the business in that. What we're trying to marry with that is getting more feedback from the greater workforce through kind of some exercises that we lead to get their feedback on what do they see, what are the gaps, what's interesting, what's going to move our business forward. And we really want to start to get the greater workforce doing that every year to kind of say, what do you think the company could look like? And then use the leadership team to whittle that down to choose what we're going to work on.
Gotcha, and talk to me a little bit about what that leadership team looks like at your level.
Being the size company we are, we're actually starting to evolve this also. Like in my dad's day, there was president and then there were a couple of department managers, right? And the president made all the decisions and said, okay, go do this. Now, so I'm our company president. We have a customer experience manager, HR, finance, we have IT, and then we have all the ops people. So we've got purchasing and call center, install, sales, service, and maintenance. All those people come together to give feedback on what the company could and should look like, in 2 or 3 years. But then the ops team comes together and says, okay, for the next year, how are we going to make money and serve the customer so that we can move towards what we should look like? So that's kind of how we all work together today.
I absolutely love that, and it sounds like a pretty well-oiled machine, all things being equal, and
I don't know about that. I gotta tell you, I think there's, a lot of bumps in the road. We're not doing it perfectly. We're still figuring it
sure.
out, but I have learned in my own personal leadership that like starting and going and doing is better than waiting till it's perfect to try.
Well, I completely agree with that. You know, it's really about taking imperfect action, right? At the end of the day, versus no action, which
Yeah.
obviously gets you nowhere. Well, yeah, I absolutely love that as a concept. So, what? Talk to me about what that journey has looked like for you in terms of lead like what that's looked like is becoming a leader, stepping in, buying this company from your father, and maybe couch that if you would in terms of what type of growth you've seen along this time that you've been at the helm of the company.
When it comes to growth for me as a leader, man, I came in, I had all sorts of ideas, of like the company president I was gonna be, right? And like there were lists and I wanted to check off everything on the list, right? And appear a certain way. And pretty quickly I learned that none of it was gonna go the way I had planned. I had to get
Hmm.
really comfortable with, you know, okay, did I make more good decisions than bad decisions today? And that was my metric of success. So I went from like have to complete everything and answer everyone and have all the answers to it's just this simple. Did I make more good decisions than not today? And so that was like my next evolution. And now the evolution beyond that has been, gosh, okay, we've got some decision making we're doing. Cool. Uh, am I a bottleneck or not? And so like am I helping people go or am I holding us back? So like that's been my next iteration. It wasn't really so much about my decisions. It's like how am I helping everyone else make their decisions? And that's where I've arrived at this. Like it's better to just start, have an idea, go in a direction, figure some of it out as you go, because if you wait till it's perfect, you're not even going to recognize all the good that happens along the way, and you might not even start, or you'll start really late and then you'll be behind. So that's kind of been my three-step evolution. And so
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
what I tell people is it's all about being prepared to do it imperfectly. And that's where I'm at today, but we actually make more progress and get more done that way than we did before. And so the company has moved that direction too. We're able to navigate change or hard things or good things faster and better than we were before.
I think that's fantastic, and I think the thing that comes up for me, perfectionism in particular is something that I struggle with, and I think that may be an entrepreneur thing. Maybe it's just a all people thing from parental upbringing or however that shakes out. But one of the things that I know that I've had to get really comfortable with is just owning mistakes, and not even
Mhm.
owning mistakes, but just the fact that mistakes are going to happen
Yes.
and they're going to happen fairly routinely, whether it's you or it's your staff or it's your leadership or whoever it is. um, it's almost like you either develop a culture of trying to stick with perfectionism or a culture of celebrating mistakes and learning from those. I remember a story that I heard about some executive at IBM. This was many years ago, as an analogy that my dad used to talk with me about, and I got to have kind of a cool mentoring experience with my father in business. He was an entrepreneur and
That's cool.
owned an employee leasing company. And
Oh,
so that was my first kind of 10 years of my career was working with him, and then we eventually went and sold this. But he used to talk about this executive at IBM, or this person at IBM that had made this huge mistake, and it ended up costing the business, several $1,000,000.
yeah.
That kind of a mistake. And so this person went into his higher up, and and I hope I'm not butchering this story, but it doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah.
But went into the higher up expecting to be fired. And the higher up just kind of said, I just put $3 million into your education. Why would I fire
Ooh,
you?
I like
And
that.
isn't that, I know it's a really cool analogy, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about. And that is that it really is about just taking action,
Mhm.
because if we sit and try to make it perfect, all of our ideas about what that needs to look like will get in the face of what actual reality is, and we can only deal with things as they come up and as
Yeah.
they're there and present, and there's just absolutely no way to hedge off every inevitability that could happen. And that's where I think a lot of business owners get stuck, is they never actually get off the ground because they're too worried about trying to do it all perfect, and avoiding mistakes.
Yeah, and you know, we've had a number of coaches work with us over the years, and one recently actually that has worked with my team was like, we either win or we learn, right?
Mm,
So it's not win or lose, right? And so I would say your words matter. Like if you're trying to establish a culture where trying and failing is actually a win, then A, your words really matter. B, how about you celebrate some of the failures? Like, who failed the most this week, right? Like,
yeah,
that actually could be a good thing. And C, it's really about how you react. That executive at IBM, that's like a master class in leadership, because how you react is going to set the tone. Are people afraid to bring the mistakes to you or
sure,
not? That has a real implication. And I've realized that I can want to have a culture where people can make mistakes. I can say that, but ultimately as a leader, I have to analyze my actions to see if those match the words, because the actions are what everyone's going to cue off of, not just what I say or believe. So that's been really
sure.
critical.
People will follow more of what you do than what you say, I think, at the end of the day.
That's actually very true.
What are some of the other lessons that you've had to learn or have gotten the opportunity to learn here, running a decent sized HVAC
Don't
company?
ever try to do everything yourself. First of all, when I came into leadership, I talk about having that list, right, of wanting to check all the boxes. I thought that the leader had to know everything and about everything and how to do everything. And I also really wanted to learn. So, like, that was a double-edged sword. Pretty quickly, I learned that that was going to hold people back. And I had to get comfortable with giving up some level of control in that way and knowing that I couldn't know every detail. And I had to start to develop strategies to know enough, right? And what it really came down to was learning to trust. I had to learn as a leader to trust other people to know what they're doing and to, have the same values and to be aligned on the outcome. And so I've spent a lot of time learning how to trust because,
Mm,
frankly, even some of the lessons I learned from mentors or like even my dad, right, was in situations where he came in, people were stealing, right? So he's a young leader learning that like you can't trust anyone, right? And I
right.
think that probably followed him in his leadership journey. And I absorbed some of that. And
Sure.
so, big lesson for me was you have to find ways to trust people and set yourself up so that the business gives you what you need to know you can do that.
I really, really like that, and it makes me think about dysfunction. I don't know how else to say that, but but the fact of the matter is that our parents' fears and our parents' mistrusts and all of these things get handed down to the next generation, right? And I love that you recognize that. You can see like, oh, I'm untrusting not because it's necessarily even a me thing. It's just
Hmm.
been imprinted almost.
Yeah.
And then what do you do with that? And how do you actually start to change the tape so that you can be a more effective leader? And as you've started to really trust and specifically trust in your team, what would you say has been the most notable difference in how your company
I
runs?
would say that people start to have more fun. This is still an evolution. I've said that word a lot today because I think as a leader, you have to get comfortable with constantly evolving.
Mhm.
But people start to have more fun. Like I've noticed that my direct reports have more enjoyment. They're happier. They have more ownership over what they're doing. Things actually get solved faster or ideas bubble up quicker because I'm not undermining, right, their authority in their department or their ability to get things done. And so overall, it's like a happier place to be. I think as a leadership team collectively, we're learning how to trust our greater workforce even more, right? Like we believe they're amazing people and that they're bought into the goals and our way of doing business. And so it's like, hey, let's analyze our behaviors to make sure that our teams know we trust them because then I don't know, I think you kind of become unstoppable.
I really appreciate that actually. I think that's wonderful. And I think the fact of the matter is, at least, and this is just in the Adam Loveridge, school of philosophy here, okay, is that I think when it comes to employees and just, and people in an operation, if they believe that you trust them,
Hmm.
and if they believe that you believe in them, then they will more naturally believe in themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that they will raise the game accordingly because they're not afraid to risk. They're not afraid to make the mistakes because they understand that they've got a leader who is going to encourage them and is going to trust their judgment. And it doesn't mean that our judgment is always going to be accurate, but it's really about learning how to trust ourselves, I think.
Yes.
Really, and what I hear you saying is that you're encouraging that, maybe not even intentionally or directly, but I think it's being encouraged one way or
Oh,
another.
I'm intentionally encouraging that.
So it is intentional.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've had to work on that, right? Because I want a workforce that's empowered. I want leaders to be in a room tackling a problem and like they bring ideas to the table. And if I've set up a situation where they're all in the room and we're having good discussion, but they ultimately turn and look to me at the end of the discussion, like, okay, why are we all even there spending our time? That's an expensive room for an outcome that I could have just decided myself.
Right.
So I had to realize that I wanted a culture with trust, that I do. I can speak that, but some of my behaviors were undermining that. It's like I would give the task to a leader and then ask them to come back to me, right, with the outcome or what their final two possibilities were. And in reality, it should have been like, you got it, good, go. right? Like, let me
Right.
know if you need me. So I had to get comfortable with that and intentionally live in like an era of questions where I just ask questions, right? Well, what do you want to do? You feel good about that? Did you talk with so and so? They feel good about it? Like just like affirmative kinds of questions, right? Or questions that may help them feel like they can run with it. And when I sort of impose that rule on myself, like, Claire, you can't give an answer. You have to ask a question. It was really uncomfortable. And there are still moments where I'm like, "Oh my god, what's happening? Is this gonna be okay?" But I gotta tell you, my team wants to do a good job, right? They want to rise, they want to own what they're doing, and when they saw me let go, man, they picked that up, like, no hesitation.
That's awesome. You know, and I think it really speaks to the culture that you've developed there. You know, and obviously I think you're doing a lot of this with some intentionality. So I'm guessing that the culture is not something that's just sort of happened haphazardly. Talk to me about how you develop culture in your organization.
So, I am a big believer, and most leaders I talk to believe this, like, you will get the culture that you are intentional about. So if you aren't doing things intentionally, people will fill in the blanks with their own story, their own feelings, and it could be good or bad or anything in between, right?
Sure.
So I'm someone who looks at every decision we make and goes, what is the implication? How is this going to be interpreted? And at times that has slowed me down. So I've had to learn to think about those things a little bit faster and more of a what do I really need to know versus all the things to make those decisions. But you have to really think about the ripple effect of the things you say, the things you do. And so we are working on taking actions every day for our daily jobs or putting processes in place that consistently reinforce, hey, these values do matter. Our mission does matter. And so we kind of run it through those filters. And if we're making a change and we can't see it align with those things, then we don't do it. And so what I would say is you have to have like a filter that you choose to run things through, to make changes, to put processes in place, to decide how to hire people, to decide what do you want to do for your employees? You want an all company event? Okay, what do you want the message to be at that, right? What kind of event is it? Use a filter to make all of those decisions. And if you're using the same filter, all those decisions are going to start to align and you will start to have feelings and events and processes and people that all match that too. But sounds simple. And what I would say
Right.
is it's not easy. You have to constantly work at it, and there's lots of room for misinterpretation or miscommunication. So use the filter, and then don't be afraid to apologize when you mess up communicating about that decision you made.
I love that actually, and love that whole discussion on culture, and also the idea that sometimes we just have to admit when we're wrong.
Oh my gosh. Well, so okay, you want a place where people can fail, right? And try and test things. Numero uno, right? Like the
Yep.
person at the top has to be able to do that too. And so it's like you got to stand up and say, I said we were going to do this and we didn't do it, and that's on me. Or I thought this was going to go a certain way and it didn't go a certain way. And all right, well, okay, we got to make a change here. So what you demonstrate, again, it's like what are the actions you're showing people? And so if I can't do it, how can I expect everybody else to do it?
What I'm hearing from you is that, and what I'm assuming is you probably do a lot of inner work.
Tons. Yes, I have done a lot, and I've had coaches who've helped me, right? And they've created awareness and given me exercises, and I've done therapy, right? I've all sorts of work, and I love to read,
Yeah.
so I read a lot.
Yeah, me too. Although I will say this that anymore it seems like Audible has been my friend
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
in terms of because I can digest that information I think a little bit faster while also driving and chewing gum and
Yeah, multitasking, right? It's the word
exactly
of the day.
100%. We talk about leadership, right? And one of the books that I am a huge fan of, and this dates me a little bit, but the book Good to Great
Mhm.
by Jim Collins, and where they go and they look at the difference between like the level 5 leaders and the level 4 leaders, right?
Yep.
And if I could surmise the difference between the two in that particular book, it's that your level 4 are your hard drivers, that have really, really big egos and kind of do exactly the opposite, if you will, of what it is that you're sitting here talking about when it comes to what I would view as more the level five leadership, because level five leadership is a lot more of that collaborative, recognizing that, hey, we've hired smart people and capable people. Let's get out of our way, or let's get out of their way and let them actually,
Mhm.
perform. And you become a lot more of a facilitator. And I'm curious, I'd be curious to know if you guys use something like EOS or something along those lines, and maybe you could share more about that, with me. But I think on the other end of that, if I'm the one that's dominating every conversation, and if all decisions have to flow through me, that's all about my ego. And my ego is not my amigo. That is
No.
one thing that I have learned.
Yeah. I mean, that can also be someone's misunderstanding. I would categorize it as a misunderstanding of what leadership is.
Sure.
Because I think I see a lot of people, younger leaders, like younger in that journey, who think that's what leadership is. Like they got to make the decision. They're the go-to guy, right? Like that, in my learning, is not what leadership is. As you've read in those 5 levels. By the way, one of my favorite books is The 5 Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell.
Hmm.
And our leadership team read Good to Great together. Uh, that was a number of years ago, but I'm a big fan of like reading a book as a group and breaking that down and applying it to your business. So I love that.
So, well, one of the things that I was curious about or had kind of floated out there was EOS,
Oh,
and
right.
that's something that that we use, and I'm just curious about what types of tools, or do you use a process or a system to kind of manage the leadership, if you will, of the company?
Yeah, so we actually have used EOS. We started that in 2018 and
Hmm.
got really into that framework. And we've used 2 different coaches for that because we felt like we didn't want to just try to do that ourselves. And so we used a coach for a couple of years and she was wonderful. And then it was kind of like, okay, let's get a different perspective on this. Got another coach and they've been wonderful. And where we are now is we use a lot of the EOS framework and have kind of added some things of our own to it. So I think it's a great tool if people don't have a framework or feel they need to change a framework of theirs. Like go to EOS and then build from there. I would highly recommend that. Um, I would also say that, as we've grown, we have learned that we need more collaborative time and ways to keep each other informed, and we need to be more on top of our data than ever. So, a system like EOS where it was like we meet once a week as a leadership team, right? And we have some metrics and then we cascade messages out once a month or once a quarter. That wasn't enough for us from a touch point standpoint. And so every day my leaders meet to talk about like what does the next week of time look like, and are we operationally all aligned and does anyone have needs? And they meet every day. Like, has the plan
Yeah.
changed? How are we doing? And then, we're making sure that once a month we're getting some critical messaging out to our workforce. We do that virtually, like in video, just easy way to reach people. And then quarterly, we're coming in and saying, hey, here's like big state of the company, like how are we doing on our goals or what's changed? And, give people an opportunity to ask questions and be heard. So those are a few things we've done to make sure that I would say to try to make sure that we're more aligned and leadership is present, visible, and available to our people.
I think having a framework to follow, especially if you're, a younger company and don't maybe have a lot of your own entrenched systems, is just an absolutely great way to do it. And what I like about whether it's EOS or really any process, improvement process,
Yeah.
it's just it really just boils down to that. Again, we've been talking about mistakes,
Hmm.
right? And I think the difference between companies who struggle really, really hard to hit a few $1 million a year in sales
Yeah.
versus companies that are doing 40, 50, $100 million in sales, right?
Hmm.
It really boils down to processes in so many ways. And moreover, I think it's almost this cultural thing of, we are going to weed out as many mistakes as possible that we can make,
Yeah.
and build processes around them so that we don't keep making the same routine mistakes over and over and over again. And I think that's the differentiator, if I'm being honest, is just how much are we constantly trying to improve and refine the process that we're following, get buy-in for that, and and keep the ship rolling forward. And so I really loved what you had to say too about what you've noticed is that one L10 every week was just simply not enough.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough for for your executives there. It wasn't enough to for people to feel truly in touch. And I've seen that too with L10s. We still end up having a lot of little mini meetings,
Yeah.
because it's almost unavoidable. But I'm curious, what your how long and what has that process looked like for you to kind of take this to where you've gone from walking through the door with a with a dream, if you will, and a big checklist to now feeling hopefully like you've kind of got some things dialed in a little bit.
Well, I don't know that I'll ever feel like I have any of it figured out. So I just want to be pretty clear about
Okay,
that.
fair.
I definitely over time have gained confidence that I can tackle more of the things that come my way. And I think I've developed tactics to solve problems or empower people, right? But what I have learned is like being a leader is consistently being new at stuff, right? So that you're
Mm.
also evolving. And so, yeah, I started with a checklist. And it was really my people that gave me the feedback that's like, yeah, the checklist isn't going to work, Claire. Because they were telling me, like, we're not getting what we need from you, right? Or we have problems and they're repetitive problems and they're not being solved. So, I had to sort of like use myself as a mini example. Like, what processes can I put in place for myself? And then it's like, oh, yeah, our business needs processes to solve these things, right? So if there's a repetitive problem or you're always fighting fires every day, like, I encourage people to start to catalog that. Like, what for 1 week, write on a post-it. I don't know, like now you put it in your apps on your phone, like, or your notes on your phone, or, use AI to track it for you. But like, what are the problems that are coming your way? And then look at it and go, wow, we need a process to solve X theme. Or like this thing that came to me 10 times this week. We don't have a process for that. Or clearly the process is broken and needs to be looked at again. But that's a really good way to start to tackle figuring out like how to reduce your list of all the things that have to get done and free up time to like, hey, what do we get to do today? What do we want to do today? Because the processes themselves prevent the problems or help people know what to do to begin with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what I hear too when you talk about freeing up time is kind of coming back to that trust again, and really the ability to let go, right? And I and let just it's okay. Loosen up the knuckles here just a little bit and let go of a process, because when you are trying to manage it all, it's not manageable. It becomes very
Yeah, and
unmanageable.
it's not healthy, right? How can you show up and be the best version of yourself, which is ultimately what your people, your customers, your employees all want and need if you have no time to breathe? I mean, that's as a leader, it's true, right? Secure your own oxygen mask first.
Yeah.
And I think we can get stuck in this conversation about, hey, servant leadership, right? And it's all about serving others. That's great. But you can't serve them if you have no time for them, or, you're not able to listen, or, you can't show up because you're so stressed out. So being able to be a leader of people, it is important to have time to do the things that fill your cup separately and that help you stay in a mind frame to be productive, remove the hurdles, listen to the people, right? Do those things at work every day.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And thinking back to what you said earlier about people show up and want to have more fun, you know? Like it actually doesn't feel like work all of a sudden. It feels like this is enjoyable. And I'm thinking about me and I have a coach as well, and we also use EOS, in my company. But one of the things that my coach asked me the other day was, what are you doing for play,
Oh,
right? And I'm like, well, I mean, I've got a vacation plan in September.
yeah.
And
And they're like, that's not good enough.
Right. And and I'll get out on a motorcycle ride this coming weekend. He's like, "Yeah, but on a daily basis, what are you doing to play?" It's like, I have no answer. I have been neglecting apparently the play, right? And having fun. And it's like, I mean, for me, just working is fun and building is fun and all of this. But I realize that that's there's a small percentage of us out there that probably feel that way, and it really does. Or one of the things that I'm really starting to just look at in my own evolution as a business owner, as a leader, and whatever else is, am I enjoying the journey? And I think that that's so important to consistently ask ourselves that. And so I guess maybe, you know, Claire Ferrara, are you enjoying the journey? How is this going for you?
Yeah, I would say today I am, but there have been points where I absolutely have not. And I have learned to take that as like a sign. There was a part of me in my earlier leadership journey that was like, no, this is just how it is, right? Like, suck it up, right?
Right,
And
right.
the thing is, there are days, right, that are like less fun than others, or days where you're like, oh, these are the tasks I don't like to do as much, or everybody's got some part of their job. I think that's like that. But when it's weeks or months, you know, I don't believe it should be that way. And I have gone through periods of time where I have felt like I'm not enjoying this. And what I've done is I've used that as a signal for myself to say like, huh, something's out of balance. Something's not working. What is it? And then I've realized, oh yeah, I've become a hurdle in my business. Like I'm a bottleneck.
Mhm.
Or wow, suddenly I've got all these problems are popping up. Oh, processes are broken, or the company needs new processes, right? Like, go to the origin of that, and figure out where it's coming from instead of, kind of just looking at the surface. The surface is I'm not having fun. Figure out the root cause. And so those have actually been times of growth for me personally and our business. Um, and that's where I get the philosophy that leadership often happens in the discomfort,
Yeah,
because it's the times where you feel like you're running through wet cement, you don't know what to do, you're very uncomfortable. Those tend to bring the leadership innovation that brings growth for you or your people. And so I would say it's okay to have those times. Just learn from them, right? You win or you
yeah,
learn. And you don't
yeah,
have to stay in those times forever. Ask a mentor, ask for help, share the burden with your team. And honestly, I've done that before. I've said, hey, here's what I'm experiencing, and like, I need some help. I even took time off, um, when I was like, I need to step away, coming out of COVID, like the heavy
mhm.
COVID times, like
Oh, yeah,
2021. I was like, I'm taking 2 months off, everybody. So that was a big lesson in trusting others here, and the team rose to the occasion. But I had to do that for myself if I was gonna come back and show up and be the leader I wanted to be. And
yeah.
so don't be afraid of those times as a leader, but, like, do something about them.
I really appreciate what you have to say about that, and, I call them AFCOs, right? Another freaking growth opportunity, um,
Yeah.
because it's that's usually, it's those moments where I'm pushed into unmanageability that I feel like represent the most opportunity for growth, and what I also loved about what you had to say there was the whole asking for help thing. And to me, that's where a coach or a mentor of some fashion is really, really helpful because when I'm in the middle of whatever problems or things that are happening, in my existence, in my business, whatever else, right? I'm in the trees, right? I can't
Mhm.
see the forest from where I am, and having that outside perspective can be really, really helpful. Like just my coach saying, "Well, hey, how did you play today?" It's like, oh,
Yeah. Oh, 100%. A good coach is, in my opinion, going to bring awareness. They don't have to have every answer for you or solve all your problems, but if they can help you see the things that you're not seeing or see them differently, uh, that's what I pay a good coach for. And I have
yeah,
been the beneficiary of some really excellent ones. And going through that process where they help you see something, it's like that is a masterclass in taking feedback, right? And understanding how others see you or how others see a situation. And then that's something you can do something about. Like, I bet now you're like, hey, how have I played today? Right. And you're like more conscious of
oh yeah,
that. And you don't need to be
absolutely.
perfect at it, but now you have awareness about it. And so, that probably prevents you from getting too stuck in some other behavior now that you have that awareness. And like, how great is that?
Sure. Yeah. Even just for me, getting out and taking a walk after lunch, is play. It gets me in my body. It's enjoyable. Maybe do a few sun salutations or something. I really,
Yeah, I mean, it
I really,
doesn't need to be a big event, right? Like a reset or play or whatever it is can be a quick tiny thing, doesn't need you don't need to like take a
right.
half a day off or something.
Right, I'm gonna go Imgur for 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
catch my comedy for the day.
Yep.
I love that, and when talking about the coaching aspect of this, do you do any type of coaching for your leadership or for your upper, management?
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of take some classes, right? Like at any given time, they know they can come to me and say, "Hey, Claire, like there's a conference, a class, a thing I want to attend," right? And I'm a big supporter of that. And they find those things often through different industry associations, right? Or sometimes it can be more formal schooling. We have people who like want to go that route and look at like local schools for that. But I have also brought in coaches who and we have one now who comes in and will observe the leadership meeting, observe that daily huddle, who will spend time one on one, like, okay, like how did you win this week? How did you not win this week? Right? What is your ideal version of yourself? And why are you not that, not feeling like that? So I have brought people in to directly give feedback and to train my leaders on different frameworks. Okay, you're all disagreeing. What's a framework you can use to find a solution, right? Or solve a problem or set a goal. So I think that that's a valuable thing that leaders, owners, of businesses shouldn't be afraid to pay for because when you find a good one, they're going to create awareness in your team. They're going to help your team develop tools, and that team's going to start having more fun. I have seen it myself, and it isn't just about fun. Like they're performing, they're meeting and exceeding goals, right? And they're having fun. Um, and so that's kind of the ultimate. And I would say you don't need to do it yourself. Being an owner of a business, I do not need to know exactly how to coach everyone, but I do need to know how I can go out and get the resources that are going to provide the coaching that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that, and I really like too I think at the end of the day, when you talk about tenure, you talk about, keeping people, right? It's if we can, I feel like encourage a culture of play, right? Of
Mhm.
having fun, of like, hey, we're here to work, right? We're here to move the needle forward. And I think that's kind of really what you're talking about, right? And why the whole idea behind coaching maybe in the first place is that we want to create a high performance culture. But I think that work life balance, especially in the you know in the millennials and down too, has become incredibly more important. And just right at the tail end of the Gen X, where the generation before me were the baby boomers, and it was just all work, right? It was
Yeah.
all work and no play, and makes them, dull boys, I guess you could say
Mhm.
anyway. And so I've got a lot of that maybe transfer in terms of, me as well. But I think that it's really important, just overall, to consider the fact that these are not robots that
Mhm.
work in our operation. They have lives and they have families and they have aspirations and they want to play and enjoy things too. And I think that when you can promote that into the culture, it just helps keep people around, and I think that retention of employees, is wildly important. Not only that, because I think it also affects the retention of your clients and customers too.
Oh, 100%. We've had customers ask our employees, like, well, why do you like working there? Or what do you love about your job? And our employees' answers, like, come out in reviews they leave, or I've received phone calls, right, from customers like, "I just have to tell you about this experience that I just had with so
Hmm.
and so who's at my home." And that's a pretty powerful thing, right? It instills more confidence in your customer, like, about who they chose to do business with. Uh, but, for me, it's like I had to have the perspective that we're a people business. Like, yeah, we got furnaces and air conditioners. That's just kind of the vehicle, right, that we like make money with or apply our skills to. But we are a business of people. And I want to be a place where people can show up as their full self, share their hobbies or what they might feel are their quirks, right? Um, and kind of it increases that diversity of your workforce. You're going to get better ideas. You're going to solve problems faster. You're going to meet your customers' needs better. And so, like, how do we get that? Well, we find policies, procedures, ways of doing things every day that are going to meet our employee where they're at. And what you ultimately will get are people who care even more about the job than you thought they did. And you should get higher performance. Like, I don't think you have to sacrifice performance. And I don't think my employees would tell you that either. Um,
Sure.
they're okay being measured. They're okay looking at their numbers, right? They're okay saying, yeah, I got to get better at that. Now I'm going to work on being better at that. Uh, but they're more comfortable saying they got to get better at it, right? Because they can bring their whole self to work. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
there's a variety of things that go into that, right? It's what you as a leader talk about. It's how you show up. It's policies you have. How many holidays do you celebrate? What kind of time off do you give people? What do you congratulate them for? So all of those things are going to go into helping them feel like there's a balance. And we also have to recognize that work and personal life now meld more than ever. So,
Sure.
people don't really want it to be totally compartmentalized anymore.
Well, it doesn't feel very integrated that way, does it?
Mm-mm. No, no,
Yeah.
you can't be like yourself in both worlds. And I tell people like the person you're going to get at work is like the person you're going to get outside of work here. And that's actually a measure of my own success is like I want people to say like no, you show up the same way in all situations. Like I'm not afraid that you're gonna, like, suddenly be a different person, right? I think,
Right.
consistency in how I show up and people knowing what to expect of me is actually a measure of my success.
Yeah, I think really being aware, and this is kind of the theme that I've heard from you as we've been talking about this is number one, have awareness of what you know and what you don't know.
Yep.
And then once you have that awareness of the things that are really holding you back as a leader, then set out to start systematically working on them so that you can minimize those weaknesses. And I love that you talked about, SWOT earlier, right? The, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Because there's this sort of philosophy out there that, well, let your weaknesses be what they are and just focus on your strengths and whatever else. And I don't know that I fully subscribe to that idea. I do think that it's important to be in your strengths, but I think in as far as, us as leaders, minimizing our weaknesses is also really important because your weaknesses and pet peeves about things can absolutely create problems in your culture and in your organization. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious what your experience is with that.
Yeah, I would subscribe to the group that says, "Hey, you're gonna have weaknesses, right, or opportunities, and you're gonna have strengths. For sure, try to play to your strengths, but don't ignore the weaknesses and opportunities, right?"
Yeah.
And one of the things I would recommend is like kind of own those weaknesses, like share them. Hey, I am not good at A and B. So I am
Hmm.
actively putting in place a process, or I need you to call me out on that if I'm showing up that way, or I'm going to hire someone that does that way better than I do and have them support the team or the company in that way. So I think there's a variety of ways you can tackle the weaknesses. Um, but don't ignore them and don't just like let them be. It's okay to accept that you maybe aren't as good at something, but then do something about it in some way, shape, or form. Because yeah, otherwise, you know, I guess I would say most leaders I talk to at businesses, in our, in the trades, are not going to just accept like, oh, this person really sucks at this thing, and that's okay. They're going to be like, hey, employee, I still have a standard that you need to meet, and like, we got to work on that. So apply the
Sure.
same thing to yourself, but there's a variety of things you can do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I get that very very deeply, and the word that's coming up for me is vulnerability.
Hmm.
And that's, am I open to, first of all, acknowledging what my weaknesses and maybe shortcomings are? But that the vulnerability piece comes in just admitting that,
Hmm.
and then, asking for help candidly. And I'm very similar. Like I've done the Colby, assessments, and I'm really high in quick start, really high in fact finding, really poor in follow through, and I know that about myself, right? And so I do everything that I can to really minimize that with reminders and shortening task lists and a variety of things that way. But also I have team members in place who are really high on the follow through, and and I make sure that whenever possible, I am deferring, those things to them that do require timely follow through, that do require, that persistence to things, because it's not my strong suit. But when we need to re-engineer a process, or we need to take some initiative and make it go, boy, in those situations, that's where I really get to play to my strengths. And what's been so fun for me is in knowing that, usually where I would come in and kind of take over and like, okay, I'm going to lead this charge. Here we go. It's kind of pulling a playbook out of the Claire playbook here anyway, of saying, asking questions of my team. Well, how would we get this thing started? Okay, now who would like to actually take this, so that we are giving them that confidence, if you will,
Yeah.
letting them go through the mistake. Because if I keep picking it up and trying to do it on my own, even though I might be incredibly competent at it, I might really even enjoy doing it.
Mhm.
But the problem is that, you will limit you will limit your success, you'll limit your growth, because, well, as you keep alluding to, you're the bottleneck.
Yeah, and, you touch on something that I think is really important. It's something that I've worked on becoming more comfortable with. You know,
Mhm.
I used to think, "Okay, I've got leaders on my team, and they all need to be good at A, B, and C," right? Well, what I found is it can be really easy to also add, like, D, E, F, G, A, and say they all
Oh,
need
yeah.
to be good at all these things, and in
Right.
reality, we have a team. Why do we have a team? Well, we want more people to help shoulder the work, but we also want, like, more perspectives, right? And if they're
Sure.
all cookie cutter clones of each other, like, that's not what you're getting. And so I'm learning to lean into their strengths too. And they're learning to lean on each other for those things. Maybe somebody's better at, keeping the team on track. Somebody's better at the follow through. Somebody's better at project management. We have to be careful we don't just like disproportionately load those people with all those tasks or
For
just
sure.
totally ignore them ourselves. But occasionally asking for help, or like, hey, teammate, you're really good at follow through and I'm not, and this project requires it. Can you help me be better at follow through on this project? Not just throwing it at them, right? So I think that's another evolution in leadership is your team does not all have to be the same. And to be a department manager or to be a VP or to be an owner does not have to look the same in any organization or across the board within that organization. It's okay to lean on people for their strengths, no matter their role. And living in your question era is going to serve you well.
I appreciate that. Well, Claire, we're coming up on a little bit over an hour here on this podcast, and we've been talking a lot about leadership, and so as we start to kind of segue, toward the end of this thing here, anyway, my I guess one of my questions is if I were a HVAC company owner and listening to this podcast, and let's say that we're still kind of in the maybe earlier stages of this, handful of trucks, and I'm really looking at just wanting to grow, wanting to really expand my capacity. What are just a couple, gold nuggets that you might give in terms of step that person could take to really just expand, who they are as a leader, and ultimately get better performance out of their own operation?
Yeah, I would say data is going to be your friend for sure. If you don't know where to start or you're looking to grow, right? Um, Start to know your numbers in all areas of your business. That's really important. I would say do not be afraid to ask for help from people who have been where you are. Go visit other shops, reach out and ask someone to coffee or find a mentor who can help you. You do not have to have every answer yourself. And absolutely prepare to do it imperfectly, like we talked about. It's okay to make mistakes. People who run $100 million companies and bigger, like they make mistakes all the time. They'll tell you that. And there are times where all of us feel like, are we the one that should be here? That's normal. You're normal. Don't let that get in your way.
You mean the imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody experiences that. I won't believe someone if they say they don't. So, at that point, at that stage, it's a lot about resilience and finding other resources who can help you. And don't be afraid to ask for that.
Fantastic. And the title of this podcast is the Home Services Marketing from Growth to Acquisition podcast. And so the question that I have is, what is your exit strategy with with this business, and do you see an acquisition or future? Do you acquire other companies? You know what are your thoughts on all of that, and the trends that we're seeing here in terms of private equity, and
Yeah.
the wholesale roll up of this industry?
Yeah. So, my dad lived through this. He actually sold our business. He and my uncle sold our business in 1999, and they bought it back in 2004. And he went and worked for the company that acquired Standard Heating. So I got to hear all about that. And so it's happening again. This happens like every 20 years in our industry. I actually don't think that roll up or private equity is evil. Okay. I think it works wonderfully for a subset of people, and can be a great decision. And I understand that exit strategy for quite a few people. Uh, I also don't think it's the only way to be. And I don't have any intention of selling my business. At this point, I would like to continue to work to grow it. And will look to take on new partners in my business as I do. Right. My dad's already out. My uncle is eyeing retirement. So I don't want to do it alone, but I intend to stay privately held for at least a good long while. And we're looking at, yeah, how do we expand our services? Should we go buy a small plumbing company, right? Or
Sure.
some other small established business? We've actually had companies that have approached us as their owners are looking to retire, right? And maybe don't have a next generation. And so at this point, I mean, my own kid is 4 months old. So I'm not necessarily counting on that, but I will look to see, are there other family members, other people in our business who can add value and would want to help carry this on for many years to come.
So really, if you could keep this kind of in the family,
Mhm.
if you will, and privately held, it sounds like that's really what you would like to do.
Yeah, I would. I think there's plenty of work to be had. There's a lot of market share out there.
For sure.
And these are really good jobs with a great purpose. Like, it's actually, I wish more people would come join us in the trades, because to me, they're more than jobs. There's real careers and lifestyles that can be had through working in these businesses. And I want to continue to be a part of that. And I think our best use is still privately held at this time.
I appreciate your insights on that, and feelings about it, and just everything, frankly, that you've shared with us so far. Is there anything else that's a burning desire of yours that you'd really like to talk about here before we wrap up?
I don't know necessarily burning desire, but what I would say is anybody in this in industry, right, in the trades, this is something I feel pretty strongly about.
Mhm.
Um, I think we have to look at ourselves as like, we're ambassadors, man. Like, we need to be advocates for the trade. And if we don't start recruiting and telling our story and coming together, right, as competitors with manufacturers, as private equity, privately held, like, if we don't start to all work on that, like, we are going to be in a world of hurt. And so, we have great opportunity to show people what it's really like to do this work, how valuable it is, how it literally like builds society around us. And I would challenge everybody who's in leadership in one of these businesses, who's in ownership, to really think about, like, are you a good ambassador or not? And
Hmm.
figure out what that looks like in your company and in your community, because I think we need it.
I think that's a really, really wonderful and valid point, and one of the things that has really impressed me so much about the trades, as I especially as I've been out interviewing, quite a few successful heating and air, plumbing companies, electrical companies, MEP contractors in general, is that level of sort of openness, if you will, in as far as, hey, what, come out to our shop, spend a day. We're happy to talk about our processes with you and different things. And a couple months ago, I went to a walkthrough of a local company here that's about $120 million a year
Wow.
outfit anyway, and they've spun off a little private equity division off of their thing too, and I think have like maybe a half a dozen companies that are now part of that umbrella. but it was really fascinating and cool to me to be able to sit there with probably a dozen plumbers and heating and air conditioning companies that toured this shop
Yeah.
and got to ask questions and got to see how they're doing marketing and understanding their metrics and just the the openness of that. And that has been my experience with various tradespeople that I've talked to, is that to your point, these ambassadors, right, that are
Mhm.
hopefully giving this industry very good stewardship, are very, typically very open to wanting to help out and wanting to mentor. And so I think it's so cool that that is a thing, and that if I'm a HVAC company owner, plumbing company owner, and I'm really just trying to get to whatever that next level of growth is,
Mhm.
one of the first things that I really ought to just consider is picking up the phone and calling you or calling somebody else from a successful plumbing company, HVAC company, and saying, "Can I come and learn from you?"
100%. Yeah. I mean, we need to build up our own community. Um, and we're responsible for the impressions that we make, right? And the
Yeah.
reputations that we have. And we need that not just with a customer, right? But we need to recruit people, right? From like the next generation to carry this work on. And so we better be good stewards in that way. And we better be good to each other because otherwise we're going to get lost pretty fast.
I don't think I've got anything else to make a point on about that, Claire. That's a really powerful way to really powerful statement to, I think, end all of this on. So, once again, folks, my name is Adam Loveridge. I'm with Job Calls. I've been joined here with Claire Ferrara from Standard Heating and Air Conditioning out of the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. And Claire, thank you so much for coming on and joining me here. I reached out to you, I think, a couple months ago, and you were on maternity leave, and so it's nice to actually finally get to make this thing happen. And you've been absolutely fantastic to have on the show.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. I would say it's been fun.
It's been fun for me too. And for our listeners, once again, this is the Home Services Marketing Growth to Acquisition podcast. My name is Adam Loveridge, joined here with Claire Ferrara, and I look forward to catching you on the next one.